Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pass the Tots. I am your host, Mike Craig. Incredibly excited to be here today. We have the one and only Julie Jones. And Julie, I'm going to pass it to you real quick to introduce yourself. But here is my 20-second introduction. Julie has been a pillar of excellence in healthcare food service for the past 2 or 3 decades, leading teams at the Ohio State University Medical Center. Just phenomenal work there. Award-winning, amazing individual, and now helping and consulting anyone and everyone in the healthcare food service space. Julie, we wanted to bring you on and just learn about your career and everything that you've learned. But would you mind maybe just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what you got going on these days?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Michael. I think it's funny. I've spent, more than 35 years in the field, and my first 33, I think, were in hospitals or acute care, as we know it. And I started first in this 33 bed hospital, right? Or a hospital with an average daily census of 33. And then I finished my career at Ohio State Wexner Medical Center, where we were a 6-hospital system here in Columbus, Ohio. 5 of our hospitals were on our main campus with about 1,400 beds there, and another 175 beds in a community hospital 6 miles away. So I spent my last 15 years there as the director, and it was just a phenomenal ride, I have to say. And, the last, from 2012 to 2018, it was just this period of intense growth and just this fun time to be around. We renovated over 30,000 square feet of kitchen and support space in 22 phases, I think over 26 months. While we actively used our kitchens to produce over 2.5 million meals a year. So that was an interesting thing to go through. But we also implemented a room service style dining program for what was then the largest room service program in the country, where we were supporting about 1,300 beds. But there wasn't the technology we needed yet to do that, because we didn't have the ability to add more FTEs for this call center. So we partnered with our IT team, who partnered with our technology partner, and we built our mobile order entry platform in 2012 that allowed patients to order or nurses to order from the bedside. So that was a fun 2 years. And then in 2014, I think that's just sort of a pillar year for all of us who worked there. So we completed that renovation project. And as part of this project, we had to reorient our cafeteria to this new concourse that was going to open up to this new 365 bed cancer tower that was being built. So we had a lot of pressure to hit that timeline so that we could open up on the concourse. We finished that project, and 2 months later had to open a new hospital. But as part of that new hospital, we also opened up what we called our Block Cafe, which was a plant-forward restaurant in 2014. We rebranded our cafeteria as Bistro OH. And as part of that, we were only able to gain about 1,500 square feet. So we had to look at some other options to help us with queuing. So we implemented kiosk ordering. Once again, technology wasn't quite where we needed it to be. So we did some technology development there. And by the way, we had to open a third grab and go location offsite. So we had a busy 2014. And then at the same time, we were working on our culinary nutrition program pretty strongly from 2014 to 18. And when I retired, we had 4 education gardens. We had a mobile education kitchen for our James Cancer Hospital, which was funded through philanthropy. And then we also had a culinary demonstration kitchen. So it was a great ride. And I think our administrators sort of liked it, because our meal volumes on our central campus grew from slightly more than 2 million meals a year to 4 million meals a year. But we held our operating ratios constant, meaning our costs and our labor productivity. And so that's always a big deal for them. So that's where I said, okay, I'm ready. I think we've done a lot of really cool things. We were starting planning for a new 650 bed replacement tower, which will open at Ohio State in the next couple of years. So I said, I think it's time to step away and let the next generation lead. So I spent time figuring out what I wanted to do. And Georgie Shockey from Ruck-Shockey was one of our operational consultants since 2007. And so she helped me, as well as a couple of other retirement coaches, figure out my next path so that I could give back really and sort of repurpose and develop new skills, because I felt like I had mastered situational leadership and I was ready to do a few a few new things. That's sort of the story of me, I guess, in a nutshell.
Julie, wow. I mean, that's exhausting just hearing that. What an intense period, a decade, a crescendo of that chapter of your career just finished with a bang. And so much innovation and change almost on a regular basis. And as we kick off this conversation, let's just jump right in. How in the world do you develop a mindset to just embrace so much change? Especially after, you've probably had at that stage, 2+ decades of good, solid leadership. You knew the business inside and out. It would have been easy to maintain status quo, but you just kept jumping into the deep end of the pool and innovating. And where does that come from?
Part of it is, I think you have to be able to recognize that the old way just wasn't working anymore, right? So that for us, healthcare was changing around us, so that the way we used to deliver meals, and we were what was called a cook, chill, retherm hospital, just wasn't working because we didn't have patients in their room. So every time we'd go to deliver a meal, 40% of the patients were gone. So what we were doing just didn't work. So I think you have to recognize that, and we could identify that. And then for me personally, I think it's been in my DNA. So I'm a big believer in the strengths by the Gallup organization. My number one strength is an arranger, right? So that means I like complex problems. We like to figure out how to put things together, and maybe in ways it's not, maybe thought about. But interestingly enough, people who are high arranger are seen as change agents. And they also like to, interestingly enough, be a part of a team and be a collaborative team partner. So I think that sort of set the stage. And so I think I might just be wired that way a little bit. And, going back to Ohio State, there's this great Woody Hayes quote that was on his bulletin board they uncovered in Ohio Stadium that says, "You're either getting better or you're getting worse," right? You are never
No
staying
middle
the
ground.
same.
Yeah,
Yes.
no middle ground.
And so I don't think inertia is a good business model.
Well, so I mean, I'm putting this together. So you say, like, look, to innovate, or at least to have this mindset, first and foremost, you have to be really good at just recognizing failure. And it's not so much failure, but maybe just change and things that need to be improved upon, things that aren't working. But you can't just stop there. You can't just point out the problems. You actually do have to have some measure of excitement to get in there and arrange or fix or bring change to pass. That's great. How did you, how did you not get overwhelmed? It's one thing to do it on a small scale, but this was just massive on every turn.
I think for us in the team there, I really always thought that we had to come back to what's the big picture, right? Where do we want to get to? And you start with the what, right? And too often we start with the how we're going to do it. So I think early on when we're thinking through that, that's what we focused a lot on, was that vision and the big picture and what we wanted to accomplish. And I do think there's that strong element of this can-do attitude, this grit, that yes, we can figure this out. I've had a poster in my office for many years that says, "You can do it. It's Rosie the Riveter." And people say, "Oh, that's that female. That's what's important to you." No, for me, it was always about when people told me that you couldn't do it, I was going to prove them wrong. And so I do think you have to have some element of that, but you also had to be able to be comfortable accepting risk, right? And this tolerance for failure, because, at an organization like I worked in, it could be pretty public, right? But you really had to build the relationships to do that. And we had to become, I think, much better learners. And we had to have a learning culture that we learn not only inside healthcare, but outside healthcare, because many of our ideas came from outside of healthcare.
When you say outside of healthcare, like where was this inspiration?
So we actually looked at casinos. We looked at cruise ships, yes, based upon the size of our model. But we looked at technology in other places, right? We would go to the local restaurants. We would say, sort of what else is working. And, Ohio State did automated vehicles in 2004, right? That came from manufacturing, right? So it came from Honda is based in Ohio, so they saw it there, and then they figured out how can we bring that into healthcare? So I think there's a lot of the things that happen outside. So when you become too narrow focused just within your industry, I think you lose some opportunities when you lose sight of that.
Yeah, well, I can imagine you going to a casino and being from Ohio State, you probably put it all on red.
Well, I was not the person who toured casinos. I was a little worried about the people who went, but
That's awesome.
but that's good.
Well, risk tolerance is very unique across
Mhm.
every individual. So I do have to ask this question. You talked a little bit about being a change agent and you're embracing all this change. That's easy because you were the director, but you had teams that had to execute and they all had their existing,
Mhm.
job that they were doing responsible for, and then you asked them to change. How did you align your team towards everything that you're doing, knowing full well that maybe their tolerance for innovation was a little bit lower than yours?
And actually, I think it goes a little bit back. We had some folks on our team who truly embraced it. So I almost had to figure out how to harness that a little bit,
That's
right?
nice.
Yes, but I do think it's once again going back and having that vision, telling people that story. This is where we want to be, and then sometimes you have to be that cheerleader for the cause. We can do it, right? To cheerlead through it. But I think what I found we had to do a little bit more of was helping people accept that things weren't going to be perfect, right? Especially when you have operations that have run for a long time. I told you this wouldn't work. This will never work, right? And so you sort of have to help people through that. And going back to those automated vehicles. So when those went in 2004, that was really pretty foreign, right? So it was a little crazy. And I think at the time, the Med Center might have had like 50 of these vehicles. Well, they came and they got trash from our kitchen. They took carts up to our floors. They did a lot of really cool stuff. But they had this laser on top, right? So that's how it found where it was. Well, what happened at one point in time, we probably had 30 of these that got stuck in our kitchen, literally just like running around in this area trying to figure out how to go. So it was definitely a roadblock. People are like, see, we told you this wouldn't work. Well, what it was, if you have that patience to work through it, there was too much stainless steel in the kitchen. They didn't anticipate that. So the simple solution is they put black duct tape on some of our corners and voila. But those are the things when they happen that really can throw a team off. And you have to really bring people along because
Yeah.
people don't have a lot of tolerance that when you make those kinds of changes, it's not going to be perfect. So I think you as the leader have to say, are we better today than we were yesterday? And we've made progress. We identified some issues. So I think I had to do more of that maybe than I anticipated.
And it sounds like, storytelling was probably a big thing. And I'm
Mhm.
just curious, what was the story? Was it, innovate or die? Was it, hey, we've got 33 beds, when you started, and now we're going to have close to 1,500 beds?
Yeah.
You know, was it like the old way, cook, chill is not going to be part of our future? Or what was the story that helped rally the team?
I think our story was always about how can we best serve the customers that we serve, whether they're in our retail cafe or a patient in one of our beds. And then we would really try to say, this is maybe where we're not executing well, right? So we in our patients, it was our timing that was wrong, right? So that because when we were cook chill, we did advanced meal, advanced prep of these trays, and by the time the patients, mealtime, maybe their diet order had changed or they weren't in their room. So we're redoing work, which created more work for the team. I think, and the other thing in our retail cafes, we just had long lines because you're manually filling out a form on this is what I want on my deli sandwich or whatever it was. So I think we really tried to tie it to how can we be better, have it be less chaotic for us to try and manage, but then be a better experience overall. So I
And
think we stuck to that.
everybody on the team had that mindset. I mean, I'm guessing you had to tell that story over and over because
Over. Yeah.
because I mean, as much as you want to say let's get better and let's keep improving, a lot of people I think are sometimes content with the status quo, and you just had to keep telling that story. I'm
Mhm.
guessing.
Yeah, we told it, and I tell people our journey to room service started in 2004, and we implemented our first hospitality center in 2013.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was a long story. It was for a lot of reasons.
9
But I
years.
think that's what you have. You just have to have this vision. You have to share that vision, and that, you build the culture that people see that this is who we want to be. So there was obviously that on the back end as well.
I mean, and at the same time, was there anything as invigorating and exciting? I bet you this decade of time that we're talking about was just a fun time to come into work. The challenges, it's new, the learnings, but the
Mhm.
satisfaction as things started to fall into place and take off.
Yeah, for me, that those kinds of things really excite me because I do like to see evolution and change. But to your point, not everybody does. So I think we also had to then show and share our wins frequently. And I remember we were doing our renovation project. We developed this whole presentation that I would share with the entire group. And we started it off by saying, what are the outcomes for each of the areas that we're renovating, and why are we doing it? What do we want to accomplish? And then when we would get it open, we would show those pictures again. We always had our team members in those pictures so that they could see it. But I think one of the funny stories that went along with this, we spent obviously years developing this, and the night before we rolled out our first hospitality center, our culinary director called me. It was like 4 a.m. He says, Julie, what if this doesn't work? And I was like, okay, we've gotten to the day before, so we're pretty good. We will figure it out. But I think those are the things you have. Everybody has doubt. I was no different. But I think if you figure out, if you're in it together, we'll figure out some solutions. And all of our transitions were not smooth, right? But we worked through them as a team and had to figure out how to make them work.
It was a subtle takeaway that I'm getting here, but one of the things that you did to help reinforce and bring people along was to share the wins. And the way
Mm-hmm.
that you did that repeatedly was presentations. It sounds like you're always sharing the success as if it was the team or the individuals. So
Mm-hmm.
people in pictures, and just reiterating constantly, here's where we're going, and look at where we've come, and it's you that's
Mm-hmm.
helped take us there. And that probably is a really great thing a leader can do to help instill this mindset, this growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I worked with amazing people, and they probably did it better than I did. And it takes a lot of time on the ground, so to speak, and having those conversations and those personal connections. If you didn't have relationships with the team members, it wouldn't be nearly as effective. So we could personalize the story based upon which group we were talking to.
Yeah,
So.
relationships and trust and all of
Mhm.
that really, relationships, trust, I think it increases and improves, gets better as you step into hard projects, and you've got each other's back, and then you start to see success. And I think it builds a culture that way. And I'm guessing the team that you had put together, in early 20, well, I'm sure it was great before, but in 2012, as you started to undertake all these changes, from technology to renovations, kitchen remodeling, to new towers, a cancer tower, to new menus, a plant forward idea.
Mhm.
It all comes together, and you build momentum. And then once momentum kind of hits critical mass, I mean, it becomes part of the DNA. And
Mhm.
at what point did you realize, like, wow, we have something real special here, and we're just gonna keep going at a fast clip?
Wow. I think for me, it was when we opened up our cancer hospital in 2014, that so much of what we did was really to get us to that point, because we were not putting a full kitchen in that tower. So everything had to happen. Um, Sort of all the stars come into alignment for that. And there were a lot of challenges that we faced getting to that. But I think to to know what we accomplished in 2014, and how well our team did through that process, I'm like, this will be we've
It's a
got
good
some other
group.
really good things behind us. So we did some really cool things. That our mobile education kitchen came after that. We opened up this really cool smoothie bar concept in our old James Hospital, which became rebranded as our Brain and Spine Hospital, that we partnered with a world-renowned neurosurgeon who had this idea for a lobby cafe bar. And so I think those are the things that we knew we were on the right path, and got to do a lot of things because of it.
That's super cool. I mean, when you get that Zen state where all the team is just vibing and innovating, and you just know whatever we tackle, we're going to tackle it head on and it's going to be successful. We just got the group to do that. That is a very satisfying. It had to be one of the most satisfying times of your career at Ohio State. So look, I mean, you mentioned casinos and cruise ships as models, and you probably had others. You probably just mentioned this for fun, but I'm just in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, she goes on she gets approvals to take her team on a cruise for R&D. No, I'm not sure it works like that. But as you stepped into those other places and maybe others that you looked for examples, you probably had the realization that technology is all over, food service, and those places especially leverage every ounce of technology, every ounce of data that they can get their hands on. And maybe you're coming back to your healthcare ecosystem thinking, wow, we're probably going to have to bring on more technology and be more forward thinking with technology. So, and you've had the chance to do that and a recognized thought leader. So I'll start with a general question. Like, what do you see the role of technology in food service?
I think it's a tool to achieve your outcome, right? So it should simplify your processes. It should allow you to move data, to capture data, to allow you to do decision making. But it's not the be all and end all. And you need to use the technology to get the outcomes that you want, right? You don't have to use every bell and whistle that's there. I think part of it is the decision making on what you do need to use, right? But there's a lot of tools that are there should you choose to use them. That if you can solidify some of those processes that technology enables, you usually get better at what I call day-to-day execution.
I just want to jump in. So it's the tool. It's not the centerpiece.
No,
what is, the tool. In food service what is the centerpiece?
The centerpiece is the patient or the customer experience. Yeah. And the staff experience, right? Because all three have to, for us in healthcare, all three had to come together because you have to make it, you have to provide a service that your customers want and it resonates with them. But likewise, you have to make it easy for your team to do the right thing and not make their jobs more difficult than it has to be.
Do you think it's easy? And I totally agree. I'm a software guy. And I think sometimes it's too easy for us to be mistaken as software is, or new innovation in technology is the centerpiece, right? And we want to say, oh, we've got these robots and the robots, or, whatever it is, like the new innovations. Do you feel like it's easy for operators to kind of misunderstand the role of technology as a tool?
I do, because it's very easy to have your head turn, and I'll be as guilty as anybody. Well, that is really cool. We need to figure out how to do that. So I think it's keeping your feet in the ground. Is it the right time for this process right now? And I think the other thing is I think everybody in food service, and this is my bias, should learn technology and just some element. I mean, some program or process, because I think it helps you understand data and flow. And really, technology is systems thinking at a high level, but it's also process thinking. So I think when you get back, and if you can break technology down and say, okay, let's think about this from a process, right? And then you start to ask yourself questions. Will this technology advance our process, right? Improve our customer experience, right? Improve a team experience, right? So what specifically will it do? And then think about it on the other side. What limits you, right? And will those help solve some of those problems? But know on the back end, to the level that you make a commitment to technology and the features that you're going to use requires a commitment of resources to keep them working, right? So that's the balance you have to decide. How much on both sides will it take to keep them doing what you want to do?
I love it.
Because you guys are good at sales.
I mean, I love that. I can't agree more. So the centerpiece being customer, patient, guest experience, that guest that we're trying to serve. And also at the same time, we have to be very cognizant of our operator and that experience and making sure that there's an evenness there and a balance and a connection. And then asking critical questions, is this technology, is it going to help advance? Does it limit? What are the contributing forces to that experience that this technology potentially brings, and being very alert to that.
Mhm.
Double back to what you said around systems thinking and everyone should learn technology. That sounds scary. A lot, nobody, I mean, a lot of people get into hospitality and food service because they really, really love food and they really, really love providing food experiences to the guests. So, to the skeptic out there, convince me one more time. Why should I learn technology?
Two things. It's going to drive what from our customer and our patients, what they expect from us, right? So you have to know what's out there and what does it have its capability to do. And you sit at a unique position if you can understand technology and you understand the customer experience, right? And the team member experience. Now you're a very good decision maker, right?
Ooh,
So that
so
you'll feel
good.
more you're more grounded in that approach. And there's a lot of work out there being done about what are some of the skill sets required in the future work, and digital fluency is one of them. It's no longer digital literacy, they've changed it to fluency. And I love that distinction, right? Because that means it's never going to be built, right? It's always going to adapt. So you really have to understand how technology works. And if you can understand that basic platform, you can throw 8 different systems at you, but you can understand that process of how you make a decision in technology and how it moves information and why it's important.
Okay, so if I heard that right, I love this so much. So you said, look, understanding customer expectations is great. And I think operators intuitively just get that on the job.
Mhm.
And that's why they're there. That's why they're there. That's the experience. They want to understand the expectations and they want to deliver those expectations. But when you can add digital fluency or a technical understanding, at that point, you become a wonderful decision maker for a food service operation.
Mhm.
And
Right.
your value to the org just grows tremendously.
Absolutely. I would agree.
So so personally, tell me how, I mean, because you have the mindset, but how did you step into technology? How did you lean in? What did that look like? I'm sure there was some learning curves and there were some frustrations
Mhm.
and failures and
Yeah.
fears and anxiety as
you
you
know,
saw technology evolve. But like, how did you do it?
so a couple of things. One, I'm a dietitian by trade, right? So I think dietitians, there's a lot of this deductive thinking that's in part of our education. But I got a stretch assignment in the late 1990s. We were implementing a new diet office system, and it was my project to lead. So we had to build this, right? And it was in DOS, by the way. so so I had to learn a lot, and I'm sure our technology partner would say she asks way too many questions, right? And I would get super frustrated, super frustrated, because I'm a person that if you can help people understand the big picture of technology, then they can put it into play. But a lot of the technology development at that time were just steps in a process. Enter this, enter this, enter this. And so my problem was, but why am I doing this? But what's it going to get me? So I think that's that piece. So that was a huge learning curve. But I will say I am forever grateful, and I think that had probably made the biggest imprint on my career in terms of how I move forward, because I became comfortable with technology. I also developed a lot of technology relationships within the medical center, and our IT team they're rock stars. They're amazing. But we were willing to do those kinds of things.
That's
Um,
awesome.
but, but yeah.
Early on in your career, it was a stretch assignment. It was
Mhm.
actually connected to technology, and that kind of opened it up for you.
Absolutely.
All right. So to all our listeners, all our dietitians, any operator, seek out stretch assignments. If you don't have one, ask for one, find one, search for one. If it's connected to technology, sounds like it's all the better. But those stretch assignments can really build the muscle that it takes to improve and to grow. And if it's
Mhm.
connected to technology, it's going to make you that much better of a decision maker. And just from my perspective, I would say personally, we meet lots of operators. I can't tell you how impressive it is when I shake hands with a director and she knows more about the technology ecosystem than me. And I just am
Mhm.
so excited to bring whatever we can offer to that relationship. So if you're out there, I think that's brilliant. Customer expectations mixed with an understanding of technology and workflows and systems, because that's kind of what it's going to teach, makes you a great decision
Mhm.
maker. Well said, Julie. Well said.
Yes.
Is there anything else you would add there?
Um, I, but I think it's also having the wherewithal to say, this may not be what we need it to be, and stepping away,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because sometimes you have to listen to the voice inside your head saying, this may not be it. And so we've had that. But you also have to be brave enough, to do some things different, right? So, we've certainly been in alpha and we've been in beta test groups and we've developed our own, and you have to be comfortable with that. So,
Do you like being part of a technology program if it's in beta or alpha?
yes, I do.
You do?
And the reason is because your voice is important. And because I think it gets better wherever you can get the voice of the operator included. And so if we could be the voice of the operator, and if we've built our relationships where our partners trust us, then I think we're good.
Okay. So let's slowly transition, but watch how I do this. Technology has really helped you, and you believe that it teaches you systems and flow, process, and those are critical components anytime you're going to be a change agent. And you have outlined how you go from 33 beds to 1,500 beds. There's a lot of people that are now coming onto the team. You're changing the way from a cook chill method. You're innovating there. There are kitchen renovations and updates. There's new towers going in. There's new menus. There's innovations there. That is a lot of planning. So help us understand, how do you approach, you've got all these innovations. How do you plan for it?
Okay. So I think, I like to bucket sort of things. So we always had, different plans. So we had a people plan, we'd have a technology plan, an operations plan, finance plan, a facilities plan. And then we'd have to find where their points of intersection was and that timing. But we would think about them, they're sort of in parallel tracks. But you want to sort of break it down into those kinds of things, because that will help you, I think, at the end of the day, understand, are you making some of those? And too often, once again, this is how I see it, you get this big, massive project plan, right? Whenever you do technology, but you're missing, I think, some of those other elements where it's going to be, you need to have an impact. And for us, while we were building technology, we had to build this massive facility behind it to support it. So we had to figure out, from a finance perspective, we were competing for, I think at the time it was called $12 million of funding for a renovation against a $1 billion new hospital. So, I knock on the door, we need this much money. Yeah, right. But, so then you figure out, how can we do that story and tell that story? So one of our CFOs, he became, our friend of the department, right? So we did tours, we helped him visualize it. Let's show you what we have and what we have to accomplish. And then he ultimately told our story for us, right? So he helped us figure out a financing model that could happen over 2 or 3 years that made sense to the organization. He put it in a way that made sense for the C-suite. And so that we ultimately got funding. And so sometimes I think we try to take on too much ourselves. And that sometimes there are others who will buy into what you're trying to do and can speak on your behalf. He became our advocate. He became our sponsor, in essence.
That's fantastic. So. That's fantastic. So you're probably like me, just keep it simple. You develop plans. There's I think you said a people plan, a finance plan, an operations plan, a technology plan, of course, a facilities plan. And that's the way to do it, huh?
Yeah, at least for us, it worked. I think probably since 2012, we opened 6, 7, 8 retail operations. We did these massive renovations. We did a number of things on, that helped us work through that. So we got good at, how do you do that and make it work? So
yeah. as it all came together, and you may have mentioned early on the stretch assignment, but just help me understand what were some of the pivotal moments of each of these projects and innovations that you brought together and brought to pass.
Okay, let's think about that one.
Yeah.
So I think a pivotal moment for us in our room service development process was figuring out how did we deliver, because we had a budget that we had to meet. We could not extend our labor resources. We were very low in terms of how much money we paid per patient day or how many hours we had. And our organization said, most hospitals who do room service are at the 60th percentile. They're like, we can't do that based on our size. So we had to figure out how to do that. So I think it's this. I think design thinking goes along with innovation, right? So you have to start at the end, right? What do you want to accomplish? And I think we did that in our room service story. So we started to say that, what do we want to accomplish? And so we said, how can we deliver this? So we would ask a question. Let's say we wanted to have our hot food be able to produce between 10 and 15 minutes. So then we literally did it, how might we? So we weren't tied to how anybody else did it. That's why one of the reasons we went to casinos and cruise ships. How might we be able to do what we need to do in 10 to 15 minutes, right? Gives you a whole new work of boundary. You don't have boundaries. Not how can I do it off of a room service line. So that's why our model is unique to Ohio State. But I think the other thing that I found was very pivotal was prototypes. So we did any number of prototypes so that our model wasn't that you call a call center and 45 minutes later a tray was delivered. We wanted to be able to set meals in advance. And so whether the patient ordering on a tablet or the nutrition aid at the bedside. And how would that work? How would patients accept it? Because it wasn't happening yet in the industry, right? So we did prototypes, very low test prototypes where we put steam tables up on a patient floor, did hard copy menus. So sometimes you think they have to be grandiose. We tried different models of heating foods, but I think that's a pivotal moment. So because you see them, this worked, this didn't work. So that was, I think, one pivotal moment. I think the other pivotal moments was to really think about the wows that we got from technology, because in 2012 and 14, a lot of that stuff wasn't out there, right? So when you did kiosk entry at our cafeteria, people were just like, oh, wow, right? So that sometimes let the wow speak for itself, and then you're just behind the scenes trying to make that work. So I think that was pivotal. But, we certainly had some issues to work with as some of our hospital visitors weren't that familiar with technology yet. So, but I think those were some of our pivotal moments. I think our other pivotal moment was really recognizing how many people that you need to engage as a team to help your team succeed, right? So we had to make sure that we were people that people wanted to work with. Okay. Yeah. I just think that sold our story, that told our story. We did so much for the organization. We became people that people wanted to work with.
That's fantastic. So, pivotal moments happen when you kind of reach that point in the project or the innovation where you're a little unsure and you're kind of stepping into the dark. And it's those first steps when you kind of make that jump and start to figure things out on your own. Those are the pivotal moments in any project of where you're innovating. And what you found helpful was to just have prototypes, just simple, safer, maybe, smaller, easier, but prototypes to help kind of make those steps into the unforeseen, into the unknown. And then, kind of pause as you're taking a step or two and realize like, hey, the light is coming with us and we can kind of see the future here and maybe take bigger steps, whether that was, with the kiosk ordering in 2014. Is that when you were?
Yeah.
Kiosk ordering in 2014. The technology keeps coming with you. The innovations are there, and you keep moving forward. That's great. Well, Julie, is it okay if we turn this into a two-part podcast? I mean, we still got so many more questions to ask, and this is fantastic. Let's keep it going. But maybe just to close out this first part, season ticket holder to Ohio State football, right?
Yes.
For how many years?
Probably 30. So.
Wow. All right. So I've never been to an Ohio State football game. But the one question I have, if I step into the stadium, I'm watching a game, of course, it's going to be beautiful, magnificent. I'll watch the band. They dot the I.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful. But, I'm a concessions guy. So what is the one food item at the stadium that I'm going to need to try while I'm there?
Oh, gosh. In Ohio, the hot dogs are Columbus based. So if you like, I do like a good hot dog.
Okay.
So for me, I would choose that. But my usual that I always grab is a Diet Coke, by the way.
A Diet Coke. All right. Well, that's good. I probably have low standards when it comes to hot dogs.
Okay.
I'm mostly just a Costco hot dog guy. So
Okay.
I would be wowed by a hot dog and a Diet Coke and cheering on Ohio State with you.
That's the good part of the day.
Julie Jones, master of innovation, a pillar of excellence inside food service hospitality in the healthcare space. Thank you so much. Part 1. To all our listeners, come back on the flip side. We're going to continue this conversation. We have a lot more to discuss. Thank you. And we'll see you in a minute.